Well, good morning. Good morning. So, today is the Feast of Pentecost. And Pentecost is always a great celebration. We wear red. I mean, look at all this red. We have baptisms. We're going to baptize Merritt this morning at 11. Can't wait. And we will renew our baptismal vows. Today in Sunday school, there was a birthday party with cupcakes because we celebrate Pentecost as the church's birthday. In today's gospel, we hear where Jesus promises the disciples that he will send the Holy Spirit. And this account of Pentecost is in Acts chapter 2. It's super familiar, yet it's one of those stories that never ceases to grab our attention and grab our imagination and help us to think about what God will do in our lives and in the world. So the disciples were gathered in one place, right? They're all together and they're waiting they are waiting with anticipation and perhaps a little bit of uncertainty. Jesus has resurrected and left them again, this time by the way of ascension. But they're alone again. And Jesus has promised that he would send them his Spirit. But I'm not sure that anybody actually knew what that meant. And there's this big feast that's going on in Jerusalem, right? So the streets are packed with people. But the disciples aren't inside that festival out on the streets. Instead, they are in their little room alone. I mean, and I totally get it. These last 3 years probably peopled them out. They were constantly pressed on by crowds. And not to mention those crowds, they ended up not being very nice to Jesus in the end. So it was probably a really good idea just to kind of hang out together in this quiet space. But God had a different idea. Suddenly, and anytime you hear the word suddenly in the Bible, pay attention because something good is about to happen. The room is filled with a sound like a rush of a violent wind. And the sound was loud enough that the people outside heard it and started to come near to see what was going on. And then there were flames of fire that were dancing around each of the disciples. This was not a quiet hangout anymore. The disciples were filled with the Holy Spirit, and they began to speak in other languages. They got up and left their little room, and they went to the crowds, and they started to talk about God and to tell the stories of Jesus. Everyone understood what they were saying because they heard it in their own language. The story that the disciples were telling made sense because it was in the language that the people understood. Most of us will not be confronted with a situation where we are surrounded by people speaking multitudes of languages and we have an important thing that we need them all to understand. But in many ways, we live in a world where people cannot understand each other. For well over a decade, it's just felt like people fear the state of our society, and there's a sense that things are getting worse. If you turn on the TV or go on social media, which I totally do not recommend, people are raging against our leaders. They're raging against the direction of our country, or the people they encounter, or the people they will never even meet. But as you read or listen further, everyone thinks that it's someone else's fault, right? The liberals are sure the Republicans are to blame, and the Republicans are sure that the liberals are to blame, or maybe it's just that guy or that gal, but always there's somebody to blame. And it's easy to despair because it feels like we'll never even get close to solving these problems because we aren't even speaking the same language. It can feel like we are stranded across a divide of understanding with no way to cross over. But I believe the Holy Spirit can bring us to a point of unity. And I do believe this. The Holy Spirit is always doing something new, continually breathing life and vitality into creation. From the very beginning, she was present, hovering over the waters and bringing order out of chaos. At Pentecost, she descended upon the disciples like a rushing wind igniting tongues of fire that empowered them to proclaim the good news in diverse languages, uniting the people through shared language. Today, she continues her transformative work in pulling us towards greater unity and understanding. If you have been here at Epiphany for very long, you have heard us talk about Teilhard de Chardin. If not, or if you need a quick primer, a little bit about Teilhard de Chardin, just a quick refresher. He was a Jesuit priest and a paleontologist. Super common combination. Teilhard believed that all of creation has been on the continuous evolution towards this final point when all of humanity and all of the cosmos will be drawn together in divine love. Teilhard saw that the Holy Spirit was the driving force behind this evolutionary process, continually guiding and pulling us towards ultimate unity. This evolution or revolution of the Spirit has two components, the interior and the exterior. So it starts with the interior work of the Spirit in our own lives. When we spend time in prayer or in silence, the Holy Spirit communes with us, creating a deep and intimate connection with God. And this communion fills us with peace and assurance. As we open our hearts in these quiet moments, the Spirit whispers God's love and guidance and helps us to align our lives with God's will. Through this divine fellowship, we find clarity and we find comfort, and we find strength to face our daily challenges. Knowing that the Spirit is with us, nurturing our spiritual journey and deepening our relationship with God, this is the interior path. The internal working of the Spirit in our lives guides us to the external working of the Spirit in our world. The Holy Spirit, who makes us to be people who have this quiet assurance, then uses us to create a bridge to others. The Holy Spirit is always about relationship and connection. When we are plugging into the work of the Holy Spirit, we will be about relationship and connection. And at Epiphany, we always say that relationship is primary. I even saw the choir mouth that. So we say this a lot. Relationship is primary. This is a statement that flows from the truth of the Holy Spirit in our lives. And when we say that relationship is primary, it means that we are choosing people over politics. We choose silence over gossip. We choose compassion over strife and anger. This is the Holy Spirit working in and through us. And when we have both the internal and the external work of the Holy Spirit, we are changed. And we can change the world that is around us. It sounds pretty good, right? It's like, where do we sign up for this windstorm? You know, like, I'm ready, hit me, let's go. And I preached this at 8:45, and we didn't get hit by a windstorm. We did not catch on fire, which you're probably glad because you still have a place to sit. And I'm not sure it works quite like that. I'm pretty sure we won't be bursting into flames today. Maybe good news. I think it's a little more subtle than that. I think it's more like stopping in an elk field. So most of you know that I live in Snoqualmie. Along our main road, we have a field that we refer to as Elk Field. I didn't say we were creative. We just live in a very beautiful place. So this time of year, it is common to drive past the field and see 50 or more elk standing in the field, completely unfazed by the cars speeding past. Speed limit, 50 miles an hour past the elk, by the way. People come from all over to see the elk, and maybe some of you have come out to Snoqualmie to see them. And for years, we've just had these long lines of cars that are pulled over on this really narrow, not really a shoulder on the side of the road to be able to see these beautiful animals. And so many people come that the city finally actually put a parking lot in the field. And at any given time, there'll be 20 or so cars that are parked with people and standing in these groups just staring at the elk. They have their cameras out. Some of them are just the iPhones, and you see people looking at the elks through the iPhone, or people with like really big cameras. But they're all just in amazement at these beautiful animals. The locals, they just drive by and smile at the onlookers. Recently, a sign was put up on the field, and it was telling people, don't approach the elk. So apparently, people are so in love with these majestic animals, they just want to get as close as they can and actually touch the elk. This is a bad idea. And probably only tried once. I love the elk. Snoqualmie loves the elk. But I had never stopped on the side of the road or gone into the parking lot. I simply wave at the elk on my way to the grocery store. And this week, however, one night on my way home, I see this woman, and she's in a pink sweater. And I realize now I should have made her in a red sweater for Pentecost, but it was actually pink. And she was clearly really excited at everything she was seeing, and she inspired me. So I pulled into the parking lot, and I found a spot kind of off a little way from the crowd. And I just stopped, and I looked around. Mount Si was to my left, with the sun reflecting off the mountain with that Pacific Northwest light that only we have. The mountain was just glimmering with this orange-red hue, with almost a color you can't even describe. And then in front of me roamed this huge herd of elk. The bucks with their many points just stood majestically, and the does were beautiful. And I just sat there. And I took a breath and let myself be fully affected by everything surrounding me. And it isn't that I haven't loved these elk, but I coexist with them, right? I admire them, I say hi, and I simply keep driving. But this day I stopped, and I really experienced the elk and all of the beauty around me. And this is our life. We drive by the beauty right before us. We wave and just keep going. And I don't think that we'll have a windstorm where the Holy Spirit comes upon us with loud sound and flames. But I do think she is waiting for us to stop and to see the beauty that she is creating all around us. She invites us to be transformed internally, to be filled with a quiet assurance of God and who God is and how God has made us for his love. She invites us to step into the world, into the noise, and offer a new language of connection and unity. She compels us to live a life where relationship is primary, and that by elevating relationship over the things that divide us, we will be able to move this world towards unity. So on this Pentecost, choose to engage with the Holy Spirit. Do not just drive by. Let the revelation and the revolution of the Spirit change you and your world.